Everyone cheered, the sound bouncing off the high, vaulted ceilings I had paid for.
My brother, Julian, stood in the center of the room, holding his pregnant wife's hand, beaming like a king surveying his kingdom. My mother raised her crystal flute, part of a set I bought her for Christmas 3 years ago, her eyes glistening with performative tears.
To Julian, she announced, her voice shaking with pride. For working so hard to give his family this beautiful home.
You are the man we always knew you'd become. I stood in the corner, gripping a glass of sparkling water so hard I thought it might shatter in my hand.
My father clapped Julian on the back. That heavy, approving slap he used to reserve for sports victories. Proud of you, son. You built this from nothing.
You are the provider this family needs. I looked around the room, feeling the blood drain from my face until I felt cold and numb.
I looked at the open concept kitchen I had designed on a napkin during a lunch break 3 years ago.
I looked at the hardwood floors I had picked out because my mother said they were too expensive. So I worked an extra month of overtime to afford them. I looked at the bay windows overlooking the lake. Windows I had paid for with 5 years of double shifts, missed birthdays, and lonely holidays.
Julian hadn't built this from nothing. He hadn't built it at all. I had. And nobody in this room knew it but us.
Growing up, the rule in our house was unspoken but absolute. Julian had potential and I had responsibilities. It started small. If there was one cookie left, Julian got it because he's a growing boy. If we both had homework, I had to help him with his first.
By the time we were teenagers, the dynamic was set in stone. Julian was the dreamer. He wanted to be a musician, so my parents bought him expensive guitars he never played. Then he wanted to be an entrepreneur, so they funded a startup that failed in 3 months. Then he wanted to be a crypto investor, and they drained their savings to help him buy the dip. I was the steady one. The boring one. The invisible one. I became a nurse not just because I wanted to help people, but because I knew I needed a job that was recession-proof. I worked long hours. I saved every penny. I drove a beat-up sedan with a taped-up window while Julian drove a leased sports car my dad co-signed for.
I didn't ask for help because I knew the answer would be, "Not now, Maya. Julian needs us." Call to action. I want to pause here and ask you a serious question.
Have you ever felt like you were invisible in your own family? Like your achievements were ignored while your siblings' bare minimum was celebrated? If you know that feeling, please hit the like button right now. Let's show everyone watching that we aren't alone in this. The turning point happened 5 years ago. My father had a massive heart attack. He survived, but he couldn't work anymore.
The medical bills piled up, and the bank was threatening to foreclose on the family land. A beautiful, sprawling plot by the lake that had been in our family for 3 generations.
They called me in the middle of my shift crying. My mother was hysterical. We're going to lose everything, Maya. The legacy. The land. Your father's heart can't take the stress. They had no retirement savings because they had spent it all bailing Julian out of debt 2 years prior. They were scared. So I made them a deal. A business deal. Or so I thought. We sat at the kitchen table, the air heavy with the smell of stale coffee and anxiety. I laid it out clearly. I would pay off the existing debts. I would fund the construction of a new, massive dual-family home on the land. The plan was specific. Mom and Dad would live on the ground floor in a fully accessible apartment. I would take the second floor, a luxury apartment with a separate entrance. It would be my home, my investment, and my future. I would own the asset and they would have a place to live for free until they died. They cried with relief. My father held my hand and said, "You are saving this family, Maya. We will never forget this." Julian wasn't even at that meeting. He was finding himself in Bali, posting photos of beaches while I was calculating mortgage rates. For the next 5 years, I became a ghost in my own life. To fund the construction without taking a massive loan, I became a travel nurse.
I took the contracts nobody else wanted. Crisis zones. Understaffed rural hospitals. Night shifts in dangerous neighborhoods. Because they paid triple.
I missed my best friend's wedding because I couldn't afford the flight back from a contract in Alaska. I missed Christmas 4 years in a row. I ate instant noodles for dinner in lonely motel rooms. Every spare dollar, over $250,000 in total, went into a joint account with my father to build that house. I received photos of the construction progress, and those photos were the only thing keeping me going. I would look at the framing of the roof and think, that's my sanctuary. Last month, the house was finally finished. I was finishing up a brutal contract in Texas, packing my boxes, dreaming of finally going home. I was exhausted, burnt out, and ready to settle down. I texted my mom, "I can't wait to see my apartment. I bought the paint for the nursery. I'm going to turn the spare room into a library." She didn't reply for 2 days. When she did, her tone was weirdly distant. "We'll talk when you get here, sweetie. Just come for the housewarming party first. Don't bring the U-Haul yet, just bring your car." That should have been my first red flag. Why wouldn't I bring my moving truck to my own house? But I was so desperate to believe in them, I ignored my gut. And that brings us back to the champagne toast. To Julian, my aunt shouted, raising her glass high. I felt sick. I walked over to my mother, who was busying herself with a tray of appetizers, refusing to meet my eyes. "Mom," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why is everyone congratulating Julian? Why are they calling this his house? Why are his things in the hallway?" She froze.
She looked around to make sure no one was listening, then pulled me roughly into the hallway, her grip tight and painful.
"Maya, keep your voice down," she hissed, her face pale. "You're going to make a scene. Julian's wife is pregnant. It's a boy. The first grandson." I blinked, trying to process the non sequitur. "Okay. I'm happy for him. But what does that have to do with my apartment?" She took a deep breath. The kind you take before delivering bad news. "The upstairs apartment," she said, rushing the words out like they burned her tongue. "We gave it to Julian and Sarah. They need the nursery. They need the stability.
They can't afford rent right now. And we couldn't let the baby grow up in a cramped apartment." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me.
You gave him my apartment? The one I designed? The one I paid for?" My father stepped in then, closing the hallway door to block out the party noise. "We didn't give it to him," he said, his voice stern, as if scolding a child. "It's family property. He's your brother. He needs a leg up. You're single, Maya. You can travel. You're strong. You have a good income. You don't need a big house right now. You can stay in the guest room downstairs whenever you visit. Call to action. I need you to be honest with me.
If your parents took your life savings, built a house with it, and then handed the keys to your sibling because you're strong enough to handle it, what would you do?
Would you scream? Would you cry? Or would you go completely silent? Comment, burn it down if you're on my side. Visit? I choked out, the word tasting like ash. I paid for the lumber in the walls. I paid for the roof over your head. I have the bank transfers. I have the emails. Stop talking about money. My father snapped, his face turning red, a vein bulging in his neck. That's your problem, Maya. You're always so transactional. You think money buys love. This is about family. This is about duty. Be happy for your brother. Don't ruin his night with your selfishness. Selfishness. The word hung in the air. The audacity of it took my breath away. I looked at them. Really looked at them. I saw the fear in my mother's eyes, not fear of losing me, but fear of upsetting her golden boy. I saw the entitlement in my father's jaw. They honestly believed I would just take it.
They thought I would cry, yell, and then eventually roll over and accept the guest room because that's what I had always done.
I was the doormat. I was the bank. I was the safety net. But the Maya who paid for this house wasn't the same little girl who begged for attention. The past 5 years of working in trauma centers had changed me. I had held the hands of dying patients. I had stood up to arrogant surgeons. I knew how to stop a bleed. And I knew when a limb was dead and needed to be cut off to save the body. A cold calm washed over me. It was terrifying and it was liberating. Okay, I said softly. I understand. My mother let out a breath of relief. Thank you, sweetie. I knew you'd understand. Come on, let's get you some cake. I didn't get cake. I walked back into the living room. Julian was laughing, telling a story to a group of cousins about how stressful the construction process was. The contractors were a nightmare, Julian joked, sipping his expensive scotch. I had to be on them every day. But I managed them. I built this with my own vision. I walked right up to him. The music seemed to fade. The chatter died down as people noticed the look on my face. That's funny, I said, loud enough to cut through the room. I don't remember you managing the contractors, Julian. I remember me paying the invoices from Arizona at 2 a.m. I remember me selecting the materials. I remember you being in Cabo when the foundation was poured. The room went dead silent. Julian's smile faltered, his eyes darting around nervously. Maya, don't start. You've had a long drive. You're tired. I am tired, I said, turning to face the guests. My aunts, uncles, cousins, people who had watched me be sidelined my whole life. I drove 14 hours today to move into the home I spent 5 years funding. But it seems there's been a confusion.
Mom and Dad decided to give my apartment to Julian because he needs it more. A few uncomfortable murmurs rippled through the crowd.
My mother rushed forward, grabbing my arm. Maya, stop it. You're drunk. Come to the kitchen. I'm drinking water, Mom, I said, pulling my arm away.
And I'm done going to the kitchen so you can hide me. I pulled my phone out and connected it to the casting system of the smart TV on the wall. The very TV Julian had bragged about buying. using the credit card points I earned from paying for the lumber.
I knew you guys were bad with details, I said, my voice deadly calm. You always forgot my report cards, my graduations. So I figured you might forget the legal details too. See, 5 years ago, when I sent the money for the land transfer fees to save the property from the bank, I had a gut feeling. A tiny voice that said, protect yourself. So I made sure the lawyer put my name on the deed. Sole owner. Just as a safety measure. Since I was the primary investor, I tapped my screen. The document appeared on the 65-inch 4K screen. There it was. The deed. Owner, Maya E. Sullivan. No parents. No Julian. Just me. My father froze. His face went gray. What? No. That was supposed to be a joint title. You didn't read the paperwork, Dad, I said. You were too busy crying about losing the land. You just signed where the lawyer told you to sign. I own the land. And by extension, I own the structure built on it. I turned to Julian. You don't own this house, Julian.
You are a squatter in a multi-million-dollar asset. I listed the house for sale this morning, I said, dropping the final bomb.
The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was a vacuum. It sucked the air out of the room. You can't, my mother whispered, trembling. Where will we live? Where will the baby live? I don't know, I said. But Julian is the provider, right? The man who built this from nothing. I'm sure he can build you another one. If Julian wants the house, he can buy it. The listing price is $650,000. I'll take a check right now. Julian turned pale. He looked at his wife, who was crying silently. He didn't have $650,000. He probably didn't have $650. My father lunged at me then, losing all control. You ungrateful brat. After everything we did for you. We raised you. We fed you. I didn't flinch. I stood my ground. You took $200,000 of my money and told me to sleep in a guest room. That's not what parents do. That's what con artists do. You stole my labor. You stole my youth. You tried to steal my future. I turned to the guests, who were staring in horror. Enjoy the champagne. I paid for that, too. But you all need to leave. The realtor is coming at 8 a.m. tomorrow to take the listing photos. This is private property and the party is over. I walked out. I didn't stay to hear the screaming. I didn't stay to see Julian cry or my mother faint. I walked out the front door, got into my car, and drove to a luxury hotel down the street. I ordered room service, a steak and a bottle of wine, and I slept for 12 hours. The next few weeks were a nightmare of a different kind. My phone blew up. Threats. Guilt trips. You're ruining the family. How can you be so cold? You are evicting a baby. My aunts called me a monster. My cousins blocked me on social media. They sent flying monkeys to harass me. But here is the thing about being the reliable one. You learn how to survive alone.
You learn that when people say, family comes first, they usually mean, your needs come last. I sold the house 3 weeks later.
It was a bidding war. It went for $50,000 over the asking price. My parents had to move into a small, cramped 2-bedroom rental on the bad side of town. Julian and his wife moved into the second bedroom with them. I heard it's crowded. I heard they fight a lot about money now that the Maya bank is closed. I heard Julian had to get a real job at a warehouse because his entrepreneurial ventures couldn't pay the rent. I used the profit to buy a small cottage for myself in a different state near the ocean. Just for me. No guest room. The walls are painted sage green. I have a garden. And when I sleep at night, the silence isn't lonely. It's peaceful. Some people say I went too far. Some people say I should have been the bigger person and let them stay. But I realized that being the bigger person just makes you a bigger target. If you've ever been the one paying the price for someone else's dreams. If you've ever been told to set yourself on fire to keep your siblings warm. Let me tell you this, you don't owe them your future. You don't owe them your peace. And sometimes the only way to heal